I think that the concept of spirits, I just always sense that they're just there. I've been scared by some of the events that have happened to me, but not entirely surprised by it. Well, in 1998, my wife and my daughter, Harper, went to Virginia because I was shooting. I was offered this role in this series called Legacy. We were moving. I mean, we had to find a place to stay, and my wife found this house in Richmond in a historic area called the Fan District. It was a shotgun Victorian two-story, and in comparison to rents in Los Angeles, it was dirt cheap. It was a beautiful home. We had rented this house from these two guys that lived down the street, and one of them had lived his entire life there. He was raised there. It was his family home. His grandfather, back at the turn of the century, had bought the home from a surgeon who had, been a doctor during the Civil War. And our landlord took us into the house to show us the front parlor. He said, "This is where the surgeon would have operated." And he pointed to the floor and he said, "You see those two holes?" And there were two holes about that big on the wood floor.
And those two holes?
He said those were used back in the day, and that's where the blood drained when they amputated or when someone was bleeding. It was kind of creepy, actually. Then you realize that a lot of people probably died in this house. I just ran down those stairs as fast as I could, and then I heard my daughter. Our landlord took us into the house to show us the front parlor. He said, "This is where the surgeon would have operated." And he pointed to the floor and he said, "You see those two holes?" And there were two holes about that big on the wood floor.
And those two holes?
He said those were used back in the day, and that's where the blood drained when they amputated or when someone was bleeding. It was kind of creepy, actually. Then you realize that a lot of people probably died in this house. We were there for a month. My wife said to me one day, she goes, I don't sleep well at night. And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, I don't want to tell you because you're going to think I'm nuts." And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Well, every night I wake up and I sense a presence in the hallway." So I said, "Well, what do you want to do about it?" And she goes, "Well, I don't want to sleep by the door." So I switched sides of the bed with my wife so that I was sleeping closest to the door. Of course, I slept okay, and I was skeptical until I started to sense this energy. Every time I'd start to walk up the stairs, which with my back to that parlor, it was a huge parlor, I never felt comfortable. I always felt like someone was right behind me, and I'd hear footsteps all the time. Something odd was going on. One day, I had worked really hard. I think we had shot like for 15 hours, 16 hours, something. It was crazy. And I was exhausted and came home late, and my wife was already in bed, and I just sort of peeled my clothes off and climbed under the covers. And it was probably about 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and I heard something. It woke me up. And I sat up in bed, and I listened for a second. And I was like, "What was that?" I just heard something. And I looked down the hall, and I saw Harper, our daughter, come out of her room. She kind of ran out and stopped in the hallway right by the head of the stairs. She just was a silhouette because of the lighting. And it was just odd to see my daughter out of her bed that middle of the night. And I jumped out of bed. I just was like, whoa, what's going on? I look at her and I go, Harper? And she didn't say anything. And she took off running and went down the stairs. And I took off, ran, and I made that banister and was running right behind her. And I just ran down those stairs as fast as I could. And when I got there was nothing. I looked around and there was nobody.
Harper?
And then I heard my daughter call my name. And I ran into my daughter's room, and my daughter was sitting up in bed, awake. And she said, Daddy, I'm scared. And so I went over and hugged her, and I said, you don't need to be scared, honey. Everything's okay. And that scared me, because I realized that wasn't my daughter. And then I went and laid down on my bed. Of course, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, when my wife woke up, I told her of what I saw and what happened, which kind of freaked her out. And I said, what's going on here? So we went over and asked the landlord, did you ever experience anything, like that and while you were raised in this home? And he said, no, not at all. He said, our house was really loud and had a lot of kids living in it. So, we were all pretty oblivious. We told him about the experience of everything we've been seeing. And the landlord told us that the doctor had lived in the house with his wife and daughter during the Civil War. And there was battles that were going on very close to the house. And the daughter was hit by a stray musket ball. And the child had been operated on by the doctor. She passed away there in the house. Maybe the child didn't know it was dead. My gut instinct is that our presence made her come out. And maybe the fact that we moving in, being a family like maybe theirs was, which was a husband and a wife and a single child, awoke that energy. As we lived in the house over the next couple of weeks, and you never felt like you were alone, but you never felt like you're in danger. And I stayed there for a year. My hope for that energy or that child is that they find some sort of peace.